If you're trying to learn how to sew this year, or if you want to get better at sewing, this is how to be better at sewing in the next 5 minutes, or in 5 minutes. We're going to be improving your sewing skills. Whether you're somebody who is a beginner sewing, or you just need a little bit of a refresher, I got you. So the first tip that I have for you guys is going to be start with the basics. Okay, we're going to start with the basics, and I'm actually going to show you guys on my sewing machine what I am talking about. A lot of people don't realize like this one little simple thing that they're doing wrong can actually improve and make their sewing better if they just pay attention to this one little simple thing, and that is like a really basic thing, and that is your thread tension on your sewing machine. A lot of you don't know or understand like why sometimes your fabric may like bunch up or pucker up, or you know why everything is so tight, or maybe like it's so tight to where your pieces of thread are breaking on your garments. And that is probably because either your sewing tension is too tight, or if threads are really loose on your garments, that means your sewing tension is too like loose, like it's not tight enough. So you need to pay attention to your tension on your machine when you are sewing. This will save you so much. This will save you like I said, your bobbin from like bunching up and crumbling up, all the little mistakes of like when you see like the threads puckering up on your garments and things of that sort. This is going to save you. So pay attention to your thread tension. Not only your thread tension, but also the other stitches on your machine, like your length stitch and your width stitch, because those are also things that can cause your threads to pucker or be like spaced out or too close together. So always pay attention to like those things, but most importantly, your thread tension is definitely probably one of the things that may be causing a lot of like stress or just tension on your garment. You definitely want to pay attention to your thread tension with certain types of fabrics that you're using. So if you're using, you know, really like silky fabrics, you don't want your thread tension to be too tight because it's going to break. So you just have to pay attention to your tension, especially when it comes to certain fabrics. Next basic is going to be your needle selection. I don't think people realize how important this is, like the needle that you're using when you're sewing, how this can make so much of a difference and like just improve your sewing and make it more smooth and steady and easier for you, and just make your sewing better. Okay, I never did like a full out video on needles. Maybe I should, but they have different needles for different fabrics in different technique. Of course, they have like your universal needle, which can just be used a lot. But if you are using specific fabrics like denim, which is more of like a thick material, they do have jeans and denim needles. So this is my favorite brand, and I think it's a Germany brand. So I use this brand right here. I'm gonna do a close-up for you guys. But yeah, so this is the jeans and denims needle. They have these ones that comes in the back of 5. This is my favorite brand to use. And then for like stretch fabrics and jersey fabrics, you want to use a jersey needle, which is like ballpoint needle. So I do have the jersey needles that I picked up, and you always want to just keep a bunch of needles on hand so you have them, because needles can break. But yeah, this is good for knits, for some stretch fabrics. Yeah, it just makes it easier so you don't damage your needle. And then you have your extra wide twin needle. This needle is this is a universal needle as well. This is great when you want like that double stitch line, like on denim and stuff like that, how you see like the double stitch line, like top stitching. So this is great for that. When you want like the 2-row stitching on your garment, like that decorative stitching. Again, this is good for wovens and knits, and you can only use this with machines that do zigzag stitching. So you can always pick you up this. And then another needle that I love is the Microtex needle, which is like a sharp needle. This is more for like your silks, your polyesters, your leathers, and like coated materials, very thin fabrics. It's a great needle to create, again, really beautiful and pretty top stitches. And this is for a straight stitching as well. So definitely you can invest and use some needles. So needle selection can make a wide of a difference and just improve your sewing overall. So definitely keep that in mind, and definitely invest and use some really great needles depending on whatever project that you're working on. Like don't overskip the needles, you know what I mean? Or don't think like, oh, it's not a big deal, because it really can make a huge difference in your sewing. So the next thing that I would say that you can do to actually get better at sewing is to practice your straight seams. Really practice your straight seams and your straight lines. You want to practice your straight seams without like a walking foot. You want to actually practice on fabric. I like to practice different techniques and my straight seam on either muslin fabric, like I'll cut like a block of muslin fabric. There's never too much practicing. Or I like to use practice sewing sheets, so like straight seam practice sheets, which I actually have some, so I will link them if you want to print them out for yourself. They're actually free. All you have to do is type in your email list and you will get them. They will be sent straight to your email and you can print them out and use them at home. So I already made some for you guys, so if you guys don't know where to get practice sewing sheets, I have them. I also have practice sewing sheets for like curves. Like if you don't want to just practice your straight seams, you can practice your curves as well. So that's just going to be your starting point to kind of improve, is just always practicing your straight seams and your curves and all of that sort. So yeah, take advantage of those practice sheets. So my next one is going to be number 3, which is going to be, I think, a very underestimated one that a lot of people don't pay attention to when they're sewing, or they're wondering like, why do my stitches keep unraveling? Like, why is my garment not staying together? And a lot of beginners, I feel like, deal with this, but you're not backstitching. And if you don't know what backstitching is, I'll again show you guys an example. But that little latch on your sewing machine where it's like you press down, you need to be backstitching like when you sew about 3 times. I always do about 3 times. So you go do 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 do, hold down the little lever, backstitch, do 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 do, unlever, do 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 do, and then keep sewing. And then once you get to the end, before you get all the way to the end, you kind of want to sew all the way to the end, hold down your lever, backstitch, do 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 do, and then unlever, and then do 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 do. So always backstitching. This is going to prevent from any of your like stitches from unraveling, any like loose stitches. This is going to help with as well. And like I said, this just locks in all your stitches and locks in all of your work. You don't want to do all that sewing your straight seam or sewing any type of seam, zigzag, whatever, and then because you didn't backstitch, like all that work that you did just unravels because you don't have a backstitch in place. So don't underestimate the backstitching, okay? So another way to get better at sewing in the next 5 minutes is going to be using the right fabric, okay? I think using the right fabric when you're first starting out or just getting better is really good. Like using like cotton and linen, I feel like is great for beginners. It's less slippery. I feel like you can kind of just, you know, go. So try cotton and linen. And another great way that you can kind of like sew and practice more is muslin. I stress muslin so much. If you guys watch me, you guys know I'm always talking about muslin. Like create samples, create your ideas in muslin, and then move on to the fabric. Practice your sewing techniques on muslin. Like I even like to do like practice like my flat felled seams and like any seams that I really just want to like get better at. I just practice them on muslin. Like I said, I cut out like a block and I just do my little practicing there. Take like an hour or 2 out of my day to just practice. So there, you never can have too much practice, okay? So it's just like when a basketball player is in the gym, they're always practicing their, you know, their jump shot, okay? So keep practicing until you just get it down pat, and it's just like perfect. Because if you're gonna have clientele and you're gonna have customers, you know, people want to see quality. So the more you practice, the more you're upping your quality and the skill, and the more people will pay. You know what I mean? People pay for quality. So up your skill, up the quality, and you know, people will be throwing the money at you, okay? Because they know you're gonna get the job done. Basically, they know your quality is gonna be chef's kiss and on point, okay? Then so just practice, but I would say use fabrics starting off like cotton and linen, and just making sure you're using the right fabrics. Not just saying for beginners, but making sure you're using the right fabrics for particular projects too, because I think a lot of the times people don't realize like, well, why did my project didn't come out right? It's because you weren't using the right fabric for the particular project. So certain silhouettes and certain designs require and only fit well with certain fabrics. So keep that in mind when you're sewing as well. So my next one is another underestimated tip that I think people just bypass, and I talked about this once before, but the thing that people bypass is pressing their seams, like, and just pressing in general. I think you should always keep a mini iron or a mini ironing board, or just an iron and an ironing board on hand when you are sewing. I just want to stress the point that a lot of sewing is going to be, you're gonna spend, and I think maybe I talked about this, I'm not sure if I did, but you're gonna spend more time like planning and like prepping and like pressing more than you are gonna be at the sewing machine. Like, you're gonna spend more time like everything that's like leading you up to get to the sewing machine, if you know what I mean. So never feel like, oh, I need to just skip this step of pressing, because no, you should be pressing, because it's gonna make it easier for you to get to the sewing machine so everything's flat in line. You know what I mean? Don't rush, or don't feel like you should skip this step, because this can really just make your garments look way more professional when you're pressing. Whether you're pressing or if you're using a steamer, either way it goes, do not skip the step of pressing your seams, okay? Because it's, like I said, it's just gonna make it easier for you to just do the zoomies through the machine without like the bulking of things and like, you know, it looking bumpy and grumpy and rumpy. So press your seams, my little babies. Press your freaking seams, because it makes a world of a difference. It makes it look very, very professional. So some bonus things that I want to say, tips that I want to say to help you get better at sewing, is to not forget your seam allowance. If you're not sure what a seam allowance is, it's just like your like 3/8, 5/8, 7/8 like allowance. So the typical one is usually 5/8 away from a garment. Say you have your sizing and you've created your pattern, you always want to leave like an inch or like 5/8 of an inch away from your original sizing, so that way it's like you have space in between, you know, for like fit and like movement. So that the seam allowance is for like movement within the garment, because even though you're sewing based off of your size, you still need to have like space within, so when you're sewing you're still giving yourself that movement in between. So that's what the seam allowance is. Never skip the seam allowance. The only time I really would say you can kind of skip a seam allowance is if you're using stretch fabrics like knits, and like stretch cottons and stuff like that. But for the most part, you always want to make sure you're using some type of seam allowance within your garment for movement. So that's just another tip that I think a lot of people kind of miss out on, and they're always wondering like, why is it too tight? Like, you probably, like, yeah, you have your sizing down pat, but you still need to leave that little bit of seam allowance in space in between your sewing, so that way you have a little movement in between your original sizing. So that's just another bonus tip. Another thing is, outside of practicing your straight stitches, if you really just are having a hard time with sewing your straight stitches, or you really are just having a hard time like with keeping everything straight, especially when you have like the slippery fabrics, or you know, the more challenging fabrics, I would recommend a walking foot. I do have a walking foot, I just don't know where it's at the moment. So yeah. Oh, and here are my universal needles, and I also have my stretch twin needle as well. I forgot to show you guys that. But yeah, so walking foot, I would recommend a walking foot. I actually have a I have a walking foot, and I actually have like a magnetic seam magnet, so it kind of like, it's like a guider. So I have that, but all of that stuff is always linked in my Amazon storefront. I'm gonna link that so you guys can have that to check out as well. So that's just another bonus I would recommend to improve your sewing really quickly. Another tip that I would recommend for improving your sewing that you can do is, if you're just really having a hard time making your own pattern, I would recommend you to literally just create your own patterns from pieces that you already have in your closet, or like go to the thrift store. I always say this, go to the thrift store, find something that you think is really, really cute that you like, and trace it, tear it apart, seam rip it apart. Get you a seam ripper. Don't be afraid to seam rip stuff from the thrift store. It literally, especially if it costs like $1 or $2, whatever, don't be afraid to seam rip it and literally like, and study the construction of the garment. You can maybe put it back together if you want to. If it's not that deep and you really don't care, you just want to seam rip it apart so you can see the construction, or you just want to use it as a pattern, go for it. Okay, you can't be afraid to like rip apart garments. Like, you're studying, you're practicing, so at some point you're just gonna have to be okay with, you know, tearing these garments apart and studying the construction with them, and not like looking at it as like, oh my god, I'm ripping up this thing that I bought from the thrift store. Like, no, you're using this to get better at your sewing skills. So seam rip the whole thing apart. I actually have a jacket that I'm going to be working on soon that I'm about to seam rip apart, and Well, I'm not using it as a pattern, but I could if I wanted to. I might create a pattern. But another tip that I have, I think I told you guys this years ago. Let me actually get it. Oh, and I'm gonna do a video on this because I don't think I've done a video on like the type of patterns that you guys should have in your like kit, kind of like your pattern kit. So that way it's easier for you to just like create things like from scratch when you don't want to just like upcycle. But I always, and I don't know if they have it anymore because this was like years ago. And I ended up finding this roll, which I was super happy about. But I got this literally from the Dollar Tree, which of course the Dollar Tree charges like $1.25 now. But back in the day, I got this for literally $1. It was hiding off because I had bought a bunch of them. But these are just craft paper rolls, and it just is like a big, thick, it's not super thick, but it's like good enough to make a pattern. I feel like they're good quality. For $1, they were good, really good quality. And I could just make patterns. I've made patterns before with things that I have in my closet. So that way I don't have to just use the things in my closet. I have something that's a little bit more thicker and easier, that's more thicker and of quality, so I can like create like a pattern or create a garment out of. So yeah, get you some craft paper and start working with the craft paper, creating different patterns, so that way you can just have them on hand when you want to make something, or you can like size them up into different sizes as well, whatever the case may be. But I feel like having these on hand, so you don't always have to pull out the original like fabric piece, you just like trace it over to the paper piece and then just have it for whenever, is good. So don't be afraid to make patterns from clothing that already exists. Like, people do it and it's really not that big of a deal. Like, I think people stress about like, oh, I can't make patterns out of already no, you can. You can. Okay, it's okay. Go ahead and create. A lot of people do it. A lot of people make patterns out of already existing clothing. It is okay, especially if you're just sewing for yourself. Another thing that I would want to recommend to improve your sewing and to get better at sewing, or just like your garment construction in general, is adding lining. I feel like adding lining to your garments can just bring more quality to a piece. So don't be afraid to, when you're getting fabric at the fabric store, if you have a piece that's just, you don't want it to be like flimsy, add lining, because that's going to give you the quality that you're looking for. So add lining inside of your clothing. Don't be afraid to sew lining inside of your clothing. This can definitely help you improve, and this is going to help you to practice, really, like I said, practice creating those very professional clothing pieces, so that way you can charge more based off quality. You know what I mean? Because we going for quality, okay? We want things to be very nicely tailored made. So look into lining. That's just another bonus kind of like tip to get better at your sewing, is adding lining to your garments. Again, back to fit, practicing your fit. You can get you a dress form if you have the money to invest in one. That can definitely help you improve and be better at your sewing. Actually seeing things in like the 3D, because I know a lot of people have a hard time doing flat pattern making, but I was so happy when I got my dress form. It just helps me to be able to practice more. And like I said, I love working with muslin. So don't be afraid to work with muslin. And don't be afraid to, like with the fit, to like have to like continue to try things on and like fit it. Like, you're not going to get it right on the first time all the time. Like, you're going to have to go back in, fit things. So it's practice. It's all practice, okay? It's all trial and error. So don't be afraid to just work on the fit and, like, you know, creating a sample. Oh, it doesn't fit. Okay, I gotta change this. This is going to help you improve, okay? And it's just gonna help you to have more patience, because I think people think like you're supposed to get it, if you don't get it right on the first try, like you failed. Like, no, you're gonna have to, you know, keep going back in and dissecting whatever it is that you're working on as far as designs. Like, no designer or any like high-end designers get it right on the first try. They're always going back in, switching things up. Ooh, I don't like this, let's change that. The fit's not right with this doesn't look right. So you got to get in that kind of like zone. And my last one is going to be, my last little bonus tip is going to be, if you really just want to get better at sewing and you really just don't have a lot of money to like invest, in it as of now, but you want to just keep practicing, I would definitely say, you don't have like a lot of money to like invest in like high-end fabrics, upcycling and like using t-shirts I think is like a really great way to like a good starting point. Like just kind of like getting your creativity and your feet wet with like using t-shirts. Everybody has a t-shirt at home, so just start there. Like if you don't want to get muslin, or you can't really, you know what I mean, start with a t-shirt. Use a t-shirt, okay? Don't be afraid to rip up t-shirts. I feel like you can make so many different things with t-shirts, and I just think it's a really great starting point to really just get better at your sewing with things that you already have in your closet. So that is my video on how to get better at sewing in 5 minutes, okay, or within the next 5 minutes. Hopefully you take some of these tips and you get after it. All right, you get after it this year. Don't be too scared or timid. Don't overthink it, you guys. Sewing is not something that you should overthink. Like I said, it's trial and error, and it's just practice every day. Practice makes perfect, okay? But that is all I have for you guys. Please let me know in the comments below what you guys would like to see from me next, or what you guys need help with next when it comes to sewing. If there's any particular techniques that you guys would like me to see. Also, don't forget to sign up for my email list, because I'm going to be dropping a sewing academy, and when I do drop it, you guys will be the first to know, because you will be on the wait list when you sign up for my email list. So yeah, make sure you guys do that. I'm going to drop that in the comments below. I'm going to drop that in the description box below. But yeah, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and hopefully it helped you to some sort, okay? Hopefully it helped you, and hopefully you can share it with the next person who you want to help, or who is trying to learn how to sew. And until the next video, I love you guys, and I will see you at the top. Peace.